Chapter 1. Boarding Pass. They always say the worst part of flying is the waiting. The long lines, the mechanical smiles at security, the shuffle of tired feet across polished floors. But that night, at gate C-19, the worst part wasn't the waiting. It was the moment the gate agent looked at me and froze. "Sir," she said, her voice brittle, "this boarding pass." I snatched it back before she could finish. I didn't want to hear it. The plane was right there, lit like a beacon in the midnight rain, engines humming low like something alive. I wasn't going to miss this flight. I walked down the jet bridge, pretending I hadn't seen the way she whispered into her radio, pretending I hadn't noticed the way her hands trembled. Inside, Flight 306 felt wrong. Rows of leather seats stretched out, dimly lit by a yellow glow that never reached the shadows. Passengers already sat buckled in, but no one spoke. No one even shifted. Their faces were pale, their eyes forward as if waiting for something. I found my seat by the window. 17A, or at least that's what the ticket said. But when I sat down, the overhead screen above me flickered. A list of names scrolled across it, rapid, like old flight manifests. My name wasn't there. Not once. Still, no one stopped me. A flight attendant passed, smiling too wide, her eyes glassy as porcelain. She offered me a blanket, though I hadn't asked for one. When I reached for it, her hand lingered too long, cold and stiff like a mannequin's. I turned to the seat beside me. Empty. But it wasn't just empty. It was waiting. The seat belt lay neatly folded, the cushion perfectly pressed, as though reserved. I swear for a second I saw the fabric indent, as if something invisible had already taken its place. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 306. Estimated flight time, 6 hours. The captain's voice was calm, steady. But in the pause between his words, I thought I heard another voice breathing, whispering. My hands tightened around the armrest. As the plane taxied down the runway, I glanced outside the window. The city lights should have stretched beneath us, bright and endless. But there was nothing, only darkness, a void swallowing everything in sight. Then, as the engines roared, a message scrolled across the in-flight screen in bold white letters. "Passengers on board 152, confirmed 151. I swallowed hard. The number never changed. I was the unconfirmed, the one who shouldn't be here. And in the silence of that cabin, as the plane lifted into black skies, every passenger turned their head at the exact same time and looked straight at me. Chapter 2. The Empty Seat. The engines had settled into a steady drone, a lullaby meant to soothe nervous travelers. But there was no comfort in that sound. Not for me. Not when every pair of eyes had turned away again, as if nothing had happened, leaving me alone with the seat beside me. Seat 17B empty. I tried not to look at it, but it was impossible. Something about the vacancy gnawed at me. Every other seat was filled. Every other passenger sat motionless, staring ahead, their silence thicker than the recycled air pressing down on us. Only this seat, right beside me, remained untouched, and yet it didn't feel empty. I could feel the weight of it, the air displaced, the faint dip in the cushion, the impression that if I reached out, my fingers would brush against something unseen. I laughed under my breath, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. Maybe some nervous trick of the mind. I pulled out the in-flight magazine, flipping through pages that were all blank. Every single one. My heart thudded. The screen above us flickered again. Passenger count, 152. Confirmed, 151. Still unbalanced. Still wrong. And then the seatbelt sign dinged softly. Out of instinct, I glanced at the buckle beside me. It was fastened. I swear I hadn't touched it. A cold shiver rippled down my spine. I leaned closer, eyes narrowing. The buckle pressed tight, as if drawn across someone's lap. I reached out, hesitating, then tugged at it. Resistance, real resistance, like pulling against flesh and bone. The moment I let go, the belt snapped back into place with a violent clack. I froze. From the corner of my vision, I thought I saw movement, a shadow where no shadow should be. And then came the pressure. Faint at first, the armrest shifting down as if someone had leaned on it, the whisper of fabric brushing against mine, the undeniable presence of breath cold and damp against my ear. I didn't turn. I couldn't. Instead, I stared at the reflection in the window. The night outside was empty, nothing but black sky. But in the glass, I saw it, a faint silhouette sitting where no one should be. a blurred face, featureless, leaning toward me. My throat closed. The overhead intercom crackled again, the captain's voice steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We are experiencing a minor disturbance." But his words fractured, distorted, as though layered over another voice whispering through static. I couldn't breathe. Because the reflection in the glass, it smiled. And when I blinked, the seat beside me was empty once more, except for the buckle, still locked tight. Chapter 3. The Announcement. The cabin lights dimmed, humming low as if the plane itself was holding its breath. My eyes darted to the seat beside me, still empty, still buckled tight, still waiting. I wanted to scream, but the silence in that aircraft was suffocating, thick enough to choke me. Then the intercom crackled alive. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice began, calm and practiced, "we have now left national airspace. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight." I frowned. National airspace? We'd only been in the air for minutes. There should have been city lights sprawling below, roads like veins, headlights glittering. But when I turned to the window, there was nothing. Not cloud, not stars, only blackness. A curtain drawn tight across the world. The captain's voice returned, lower this time, threaded with static. "Destination, 6 hours, together." I froze. Together? The words twisted in my ears, broken, as though another voice had bled through the transmission. A whisper, soft, layered, almost a chant. I wasn't the only one who heard it. A woman 3 rows ahead unclasped her seatbelt and stood, her lips moving in frantic prayer. She staggered toward the aisle, reaching for the call button. The flight attendant was already there. Her smile was perfect, plastered, too wide. She pressed a hand against the woman's shoulder, guiding her back into her seat with gentle firmness. The woman tried to resist. She opened her mouth to protest, then stopped. Her head jerked once, sharply, like a puppet pulled on strings. And then she sat down, silent, eyes blank. The intercom clicked again. "Please remain seated," the captain said. His tone never changed. Calm, patient, almost rehearsed. "We are perfectly on course." But my screen flickered above, betraying him. Destination, unknown. Flight time. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, the screen had returned to normal. Estimated arrival, 5H47M, as though nothing had happened. The engines rumbled deeper, a sound that vibrated through bone. My stomach clenched. We were climbing higher, too high. And then, something impossible. The windows along the cabin glowed faintly, as if lit from the outside. Passengers turned their heads in unison. Beyond the glass, shapes moved, tall, distorted figures pacing just beyond the plane, as though walking on the skin of the sky. I pressed my forehead against the cold pane, desperate to see clearer. And that's when the intercom whispered again, so soft I almost missed it. "One passenger unconfirmed. Balance must be restored." The seat beside me creaked. I didn't dare look. Chapter 4. The Child Who Didn't Blink. I told myself not to look around anymore. Don't meet their eyes. Don't give the silence power. But the silence wasn't the problem. It was what I felt watching me. I turned slowly, scanning the rows, and that's when I saw him. A child, no more than 7, maybe 8, sitting alone in the last row, directly down the aisle. Pale face, small hands folded neatly on his lap. At first, he seemed ordinary, just another passenger in this nightmare of a flight. Until I realized he wasn't blinking. Not once. His eyes were fixed on me, dark and glassy, reflecting the faint cabin light. I waited for the natural flicker, the tiny closure every human body demands. It never came. Seconds stretched into minutes. He just stared, unbroken, as if carved from something colder than flesh. A shudder ran down my spine. I looked away, pretending to adjust the blanket the attendant had given me. When I looked back, he was closer. 2 rows closer. I hadn't seen him move. No shuffle of footsteps, no creak of leather seats. Just there, staring. My breath quickened. I jabbed the call button above me, desperate for some semblance of authority, of help. A chime rang, soft and mocking. Within seconds, the same smiling flight attendant appeared. "Yes, sir?" she asked. I pointed down the aisle, my voice trembling. "That boy, he's alone. He's moving seats. Someone should..." But when I glanced back, the row was empty. The attendant's smile didn't falter. "All passengers are accounted for," she said. "Perhaps you should rest." She reached out, patting my shoulder. Her hand lingered, cold, pressing harder than necessary. Then she turned, gliding away, as if on rails. I sagged into my seat, my pulse hammering. I knew what I'd seen. I forced myself to look again, and there he was, right across the aisle this time, sitting just one row behind, still staring, still unblinking. His lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to speak, but no sound came, just the endless watching. I clenched my fists, rage building against the fear. "What do you want?" I whispered, too low for anyone else to hear. His mouth moved, slowly, silently. One word: "You." The lights above flickered. The cabin seemed to stretch, the air thickening, pressing down on me. And when the lights steadied again, the boy was gone, vanished. I turned to the empty seat beside me, its buckle still locked tight. And in the dark reflection of the window, just faint enough to doubt, I saw him sitting there, right next to me, watching. Chapter 5. Turbulence. The first jolt came without warning, a sudden lurch that sent a ripple through the cabin. Overhead bins rattled. A glass tumbled from a tray 2 rows ahead, shattering against the floor. But no one reacted. Not a scream, not a flinch. Every passenger sat stiff, hands folded, eyes blank, like mannequins strapped into leather seats. The plane shook again, harder this time. My stomach dropped as the aisle lights flickered, casting long shadows that swayed like ropes. The captain's voice boomed from the intercom, steady, too steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. Just a little turbulence." Little? My teeth clattered as the cabin rattled violently, trays slamming open, loose items skittering across the floor. My seatbelt dug into my ribs, but when I glanced at the cup of water on my tray, my blood ran cold. It was perfectly still. Not a ripple. The shaking grew worse, the sound of metal groaning under pressure, but the water stayed flat, a mirror reflecting my pale face. My breath caught. This wasn't turbulence, this was something else. Across the aisle, a woman's head turned toward me, slowly, too slowly. Her neck bent at an angle that made my bones ache just to watch. Her lips parted, and though the engines roared, I heard her voice clear as glass. "He wants you to stand." The words slipped like ice into my ears. Before I could respond, the overhead bins burst open. Luggage rained down, thudding against unmoving passengers. One suitcase split open, spilling clothes across the aisle. But the garments were not fabric. They were photographs. Hundreds of photographs. Faces of strangers. Mouths frozen in screams, eyes wide with terror. My breath hitched. Among them I saw my own face. Younger, smiling, a picture I had never taken. The plane tilted suddenly, plunging into a steep descent. Gravity crushed me against the seat. And yet, again, the water in the cup remained calm. Flat. Wrong. I gripped the armrests, knuckles white, heart hammering. "What is happening?" I whispered, though I knew no answer would come. But it did. The intercom hissed, a broken voice stitched over the captain's steady tone. A whisper layered with countless echoes. "Balance must be broken, or restored." And then silence. The plane leveled out, as if nothing had happened. Overhead bins closed on their own. The photos were gone. The cabin was immaculate once more, except for the water. It rippled now, just once, a single deliberate pulse, as though something beneath had tapped the surface. I lifted my eyes. Every passenger was staring at me again. Chapter 6. The flight attendant's smile. It started with a smile. She stood in the aisle, perfectly still, as though waiting for a cue that never came. Her uniform was immaculate, not a crease out of place, and her hair was pinned so tight it might have been painted on. But her smile, that smile didn't belong to her face. It was too wide, too permanent. When our eyes met, she moved toward me, gliding more than walking, her shoes making no sound on the carpet. My pulse quickened. Something about the way she looked at me felt like a performance, like she'd been practicing that expression for years. "Sir," she said, voice honey-sweet, "are you comfortable?" My throat tightened. Her smile stretched further, impossibly so, until her cheeks trembled from the strain. She didn't blink. She just stood there, teeth bared, like a doll wound too tight. Around us, no other passenger stirred. Every head remained forward, frozen, as though none of them noticed her at all. As though she and I were the only two people alive on this plane. "I can get you anything," she continued, words dripping with something unhuman. "A blanket, a drink, or perhaps She leaned closer, her lips hovered by my ear, her voice fractured, layered, as though 100 throats whispered through hers. "A reason you are here." I recoiled, heart slamming against my ribs. Her perfume was faint, metallic, like rust. I tried to push her away, but her hand landed on mine first. Cold, too cold, fingers stiff, bone-like, pressing hard enough to bruise. Her smile never faltered. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "And yet..." She tilted her head, studying me. For the first time, the smile flickered, faltered into something raw. Not kindness, not duty, hunger. I yanked my hand back. "Stay away from me." Her laugh was quiet but wrong. The sound echoed, bouncing through the cabin as though the plane itself was mocking me. Then, as quickly as it had cracked, her smile returned, flawless once more. She straightened, smoothing her skirt. "Very well," she said. "Remain in your seat." And with that she turned. But she didn't walk away. She drifted down the aisle, head fixed forward, smile frozen. As she passed each row, passengers lifted their chins at the exact same angle, eyes tracking her like puppets in perfect unison. At the far end of this cabin, she stopped, slowly, mechanically. Her head twisted all the way around, an impossible angle, and she looked directly back at me. Still smiling, still waiting. Chapter 7. The Locked Bathroom. The sound came first. A steady pounding, faint at the beginning, like knuckles tapping against wood. Then it grew harder, heavier, until it rattled the thin cabin walls. I turned my head toward the rear of the plane. The bathroom door trembled with each strike, its metal handle twitching like it might snap. But no one else reacted. Not a single passenger looked up. Their faces remained forward, hollow, their bodies rigid as mannequins. The silence of the cabin clashed with the violence of that door, and the contradiction made my stomach twist. I unbuckled my seatbelt. The moment the clasp snapped free, the intercom hissed. "Passengers are advised to remain seated." The captain's voice, calm as ever. Too calm. I stood anyway. My legs felt heavy, like the aisle had stretched longer than before. Every step toward the rear of the cabin was harder than the last, as though the carpet dragged against me. The pounding grew sharper, frantic, and beneath it, another sound. A voice, muffled, desperate. "Please, open, let me out." The hairs on my arms rose. The plea wasn't coming from inside the bathroom. It was coming from everywhere, above me, beneath me, inside me. When I reached the door, I grabbed the handle. Ice burned my palm instantly. The metal was too cold, like it had been buried in snow. I pulled back with a hiss, then tried again. Locked. I pressed my ear against the surface. The whispering was clearer now, a chorus of voices overlapping, begging, sobbing, and underneath it all, a wet sound, the unmistakable drip of liquid hitting tile. I knocked once. "Who's in there?" My voice cracked. The door shook violently, as if something inside had hurled itself against it. My breath caught in my throat. Then silence, utter silence. I hesitated, then reached for the latch once more, and to my shock, it turned, smooth, effortless. The door swung open, empty. No passenger, no shadows, just a small, sterile bathroom. The mirror gleamed, the sink shone. The kind of hollow cleanliness that should have been comforting, but my eyes fell to the floor. The tiles were soaked in red, a dark, glistening pool that should have been impossible in such a small space. And in the center of that pool lay something far worse than blood. A boarding pass. I bent down, trembling, and picked it up. My breath caught when I read the name. It was mine, and the seat number wasn't 17A anymore. It was 17B. The seat beside me, the seat that was never empty. Behind me, the bathroom door slammed shut on its own. Chapter 8. Seat 13. They say every plane has a seat no one wants. On Flight 306, that seat was 13A. I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe I'd been too focused on the whispers, the stares, the impossible things clawing at the edges of my sanity. But that night, after what I saw in the bathroom, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Row 13, a single window seat, empty. No passenger dared sit there. Even the flight attendants avoided looking at it, their painted smiles faltering whenever they passed. And yet, the seatbelt lay fastened, neat and deliberate, like someone had been there all along. I don't know what possessed me. Fear, defiance, maybe the need to prove I wasn't losing my mind. But I stood, my knees weak, and walked down the aisle. The passengers didn't move, didn't blink. but I felt their heads turn, following me in silence. When I reached row 13, I hesitated. My chest tightened, every instinct screaming to stop, but my hand moved anyway, sliding the buckle free. The moment I sat down, everything changed. The cabin lights dimmed to black. The hum of the engines vanished. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, no life. And then came the memories. Not mine. A flood of images burst through my skull. Strangers' faces, each one twisted in fear. Voices calling for help in languages I didn't understand. The burning sting of smoke in my lungs. The sickening plunge of falling through endless skies. I gripped the armrests, choking. It was like I was living through every death that seat had ever witnessed. And in the chaos, I saw myself. Not as I was now, but sitting in that very seat, 13A, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear. My reflection within the memory looked at me, as if aware, as if alive. The vision cracked apart. The cabin lights snapped back on. Passengers sat frozen again, heads forward as though nothing had happened. But something was wrong. When I glanced up at the overhead screen, my breath hitched. Passenger count, 152. Confirmed, 152. For the first time, the numbers matched, which meant I wasn't the unconfirmed passenger anymore. Someone else was. I turned my head toward the seat I had abandoned, 17A, my seat. And there, buckled neatly, sat a shadow, my shadow. Its head tilted, grinning through the dark reflection of my own face. The announcement dinged overhead. A voice that wasn't the captain's whispered through the cabin. Balance has shifted. The flight continues. And everyone, all 151 of them, smiled in unison. Chapter 9. The Captain's Door. For hours I told myself not to look at it. The cockpit door, sealed tight, painted in shadow at the front of the cabin. I tried to convince myself the captain was inside, calm hands on the controls, guiding us through this endless night. But a voice inside me whispered the truth. No one had seen him, not once. And tonight, the door wasn't still. It pulsed, as though something on the other side was breathing. I rose from my seat. The aisle stretched before me, long and silent. Every passenger's head turned in perfect unison, following my every step. The closer I came to the door, the louder the hum of the engines grew, a vibration that rattled my teeth. When I reached it, I pressed my hand against the cold surface. For a moment, nothing. Then, movement. A violent thud from within, rattling the frame. My breath hitched. The intercom hissed. The captain's voice came through, smooth and steady, almost rehearsed. "Please remain seated. Everything is under control." But the words were wrong, too slow, too careful, as if someone or something was piecing them together for the first time. I twisted the handle. To my shock, it turned. The door cracked open. Darkness spilled out, thick and suffocating, swallowing the glow of the cabin. Inside, the cockpit wasn't filled with instruments or lights. It was a cavern of shadows, stretching far beyond the plane's frame, deeper than any room should go. And at its center, radios. Dozens of them, stacked high, blinking with faint red lights. Each one crackled with static. I stepped inside, my pulse thundering. One of the radios sputtered to life. A voice, not the captain's, my own. "Don't let them land," it said, broken, terrified. My voice. I stumbled back. Another radio lit up, a different voice this time, a woman's, desperate. "They're not passengers. They're names. Names waiting to be called." The radios came alive, one by one, flooding the room with whispers, screams, prayers, and dozens of tongues. The noise pressed into my skull. A storm of voices that didn't belong together but refused to stop. And then all at once, silence. A single voice cut through, calm, patient, too familiar. "Passenger 306, it said. "Me!" My eyes widened, because the cockpit wasn't empty after all. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, wearing my face, smiling. Chapter 10. The Falling Sky. The sky was breaking. I saw it first through the tiny oval window at my side. A hairline crack across the heavens, faint at the start, like a smudge on glass. But then it spread, splintering outward in jagged lines, until the night above us fractured like a mirror under a hammer. The plane shuddered, engines groaning. Passengers didn't scream. They didn't even blink. They just turned their heads in unison, gazes fixed on the breaking sky. I pressed my forehead against the glass, desperate to understand, and then the cracks opened. Pieces of the night fell away, heavy slabs of darkness tumbling downward. revealing something behind it. Not stars, not clouds, but an endless abyss of pale light, alive and pulsing like the inside of a living eye. My stomach twisted. We weren't flying through the sky anymore. We were flying into something. The intercom hissed. Static bled into the captain's voice, but this time it wasn't calm. It was strained, trembling. Passengers remain seated. Descent required. The word descent repeated, layered with whispers until it became a chant echoing through the cabin. And then it began. One by one, passengers vanished, not in screams or flashes, but silently, dissolving into the air as if their bodies had never existed. A woman in front of me clutched her rosary, lips moving in frantic prayer. Then she faded mid-word, her beads clattering to the empty seat. A man 2 rows behind me turned to dust between heartbeats, his briefcase sliding into nothing. The seat beside me, 17B, buckled tight as always, pressed down by something unseen. But now I saw it clearly, a shadow rising, coalescing into form. Its head tilted toward me, the outline of a grin etched into darkness. "Not yet," it whispered, though no lips moved. The plane tilted violently, plunging nose first toward the fractured horizon. My body slammed against the seatbelt, lungs crushed by the sudden drop. The overhead bins burst, luggage tumbling, oxygen masks dangling like nooses. Through the chaos I heard it, my own name, spoken not once, but dozens of times, in dozens of voices. Each passenger that remained whispered it in perfect rhythm, my name rolling like thunder, rattling my bones. I clawed at the buckle, desperate to move, to run, but it wouldn't release. My hands passed through it, as though I wasn't tethered by plastic and steel, but by something far older, far crueler. The cracks in the sky widened, and beyond them, shapes moved. Towering silhouettes walking the horizon, faces hidden, arms stretching wide as if to welcome us home. The intercom spat one final word before the cabin went black. "Prepare." And then the sky itself collapsed. Chapter 11. Black Box. I thought the fall would kill us, but instead, the plane leveled. One violent jolt, a crack of metal, and then stillness, as though gravity itself had paused. My lungs screamed for air, my body shaking from the descent that should have torn us apart. The cabin was silent again. Too silent. That's when I saw it. Resting on the tray table in front of me, black, small, harmless at first glance, a flight recorder. The black box. My pulse stumbled. This wasn't possible. I knew these things were bolted deep inside the cockpit, unreachable, indestructible. And yet here it was, humming faintly, its surface warm beneath my trembling fingers. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. The speaker inside sputtered to life. Static poured out, loud enough to make my ears ring. Then, slowly, a voice emerged. My voice. "Don't let them land." I froze, my chest clenched tight. The voice was mine, raw with terror, recorded as if I had already lived this moment and failed. Another burst of static. Another voice followed, a child's this time. Flat, monotone. "One passenger unconfirmed. Balance must shift." The blood drained from my face. I slammed the box shut, but it didn't stop. Voices kept spilling out. A man crying, a woman praying. Screams that rattled the hollow cabin walls. Dozens, hundreds of them, all layered together, all passengers from flights that never made it home. And threaded between them over and over was my name. I staggered to my feet. The passengers didn't move. Their eyes were forward, lips stretched into faint smiles, but I could hear them now. Faint and ghostly, echoing the voices inside the black box. The intercom clicked on. Not the captain this time. Something else. Something using his tone like a mask. "Passenger 306, it whispered, calm and absolute. "You carry the record now." The black box vibrated violently in my hands. Its casing split open, revealing not wires, not circuits, but teeth. Small, jagged, human teeth, grinning up at me. I dropped it with a scream. It hit the floor, but instead of breaking, it opened wider. The voices roared out in unison, deafening. And beneath them, one final whisper, so close it might have come from inside my own skull. "You're not listening to the box is listening to you." I stumbled back, my heel catching the edge of the aisle. When I looked again, the black box was gone, vanished. Only silence remained. But the tray table in front of me was no longer empty. On it sat another boarding pass, my name, my seat, Only this time the seat number wasn't 17A. It wasn't 13A. It was 0. No row, no place, nowhere. Chapter 12. The passenger list. They gave me the list. I don't know how it appeared. One moment my tray was empty, the next there it lay, a thin stack of paper, yellowed with age, edges curled as if plucked from another decade. No logo, no stamp, just names, row by row, seat by seat. The passenger manifest. My hands shook as I turned the first page. Names, so many names, more than 100 scrawled in faded black ink, each one neatly crossed out with a single red line. Row 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B, all gone, line after line erased. Every passenger except one. I flipped faster, my breath ragged, until I reached the last page. Only a single name remained untouched. Mine. I felt the cabin tilt around me, the air pressing down like a weight. The passengers didn't move, but their silence grew louder. If silence could scream. I turned the paper over. On the back, written in smeared red, were words that weren't names at all, but instructions. One must remain. One must remember. The last passenger carries the flight. My mouth went dry. I looked up, desperate for some sign of life, and caught sight of the boy, the one who never blinked, sitting just a few rows ahead. His small hands clutched the same manifest, but his pages were all black, nothing but ink. He turned his head, his eyes hollow, and mouthed a word I couldn't hear. Behind me the intercom crackled. The captain's voice returned, steady and rehearsed, but beneath it I heard the layering of countless others. Passenger count, 152. Confirmed, 1. The manifest slipped from my grip, fluttering to the floor. When it landed, the ink bled, the names vanishing before my eyes, leaving the paper blank except for a single word written in red across the page. You. My chest tightened. I stumbled into the aisle, clutching at the seats as I moved forward, but every head turned in unison, every face locked on mine. They were no longer passengers, they were placeholders, echoes, names that had been crossed out, and I was the one name left. A hand clamped around my wrist, cold, heavy. I turned. The smiling flight attendant stood there, her grin stretching wider than ever. In her other hand she held the manifest, blank now, waiting. Her voice was not her own when she spoke. It was everyone's at once. Sign here. The pen dripped red. I pulled back, trembling, refusing to touch it. But the plane lurched violently, forcing me against her grip. The pen brushed my skin, staining it like fire. And then I heard them, all 151 voices whispering in unison, echoing through the endless dark beyond the windows. Write your name, or let us write it for you. Chapter 13. The Last Meal. They served dinner at midnight. The cabin lights flickered on, bathing the passengers in a pale glow. Trays descended one by one, placed carefully in front of every seat by attendants who never broke their frozen smiles. The air filled with the smell of food, warm, heavy, wrong. I glanced at the tray set before me, a sealed box, plastic fork, napkin folded too neatly, just like any other flight. But my stomach turned before I even touched it. The man across the aisle peeled his lid back. Steam rose. What looked like chicken and rice glistened under the dim light. He raised his fork, hands shaking, and then he ate without chewing, without blinking. His mouth moved mechanically like a machine-fed fuel. The woman beside him did the same. Then another, and another. Every passenger lifted their forks in perfect rhythm, eating in silence, chewing air, swallowing nothing. I forced my eyes back to my own tray. My hands trembled as I peeled the lid open. Not food. A passport. My passport. Its cover soaked in something dark, sticky, blood. I lifted it with shaking fingers, and pages fluttered open. Each one stamped, not with countries, not with dates, but with words scratched in red. Confirmed. 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 Page after page, until the very last one. It was blank, waiting. I slammed it shut, heart racing, but when I looked up, every passenger had stopped eating. Their forks hovered in the air. Their heads turned toward me, slowly, mechanically, like clock hands. And then, in perfect unison, they said my name. The sound was low, guttural, 100 voices layering until the air itself vibrated with it. My fork clattered to the floor. The flight attendant appeared again, gliding down the aisle. She placed her hand on my tray. Her smile cracked wider, showing too many teeth. "You must eat," she whispered, voice sharp as glass. I shook my head. "I can't." Her eyes narrowed. "Then you'll be eaten." The cabin lights went out. When they came back on, my tray was empty, the passport gone. In its place, a slab of raw meat, glistening, steaming, pulsing faintly as though alive. The smell hit me, metallic, human, and in that moment I knew. It wasn't meat, it was me. A piece of me. The overhead screen flickered. Bold white letters scrolled across. "Last meal accepted. Passenger 306. Confirmation pending." I pushed the tray away, bile rising in my throat. But the passengers never stopped staring. Their mouths opened in wide, unnatural grins. And in one voice they whispered the same command: "Eat." Chapter 14. The Descent. The announcement came at 3:06 a.m. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice hummed, smooth but broken by static, "we have begun our descent." My blood froze. Descent? Descent to where? Outside the windows there was no city, no horizon, no earth. Only that fractured sky, bleeding pale light through the cracks like veins glowing beneath skin. The plane tilted nose down, engines roaring as though fighting against something unseen. My stomach lurched, pressed hard against the belt. But when I looked at the passengers around me, they didn't move, not one of them. Their bodies sat upright, perfectly balanced, heads tilted slightly back as if welcoming the drop. I forced my gaze to the window and saw it. Below us stretched not an airport runway, but a wasteland. Endless ground cracked open like a graveyard, littered with wreckage, wings, fuselages, tails of planes torn apart, stacked like bones in a mass grave. Some still burned faintly. Others were rusted and ancient. Their logos faded to ghosts. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them, every plane that had never arrived. My throat closed. The plane shuddered harder. Panels rattled above. Oxygen masks tumbled down, swaying like nooses. I grabbed one, desperate for air, but the tube pulsed under my fingers, alive, writhing like a vein. I ripped it away with a cry. The intercom clicked again, but this time it wasn't the captain's voice. It was mine. "Passenger 306, it whispered, layered with a chorus of other voices, screaming, praying, laughing. "Prepare to disembark." I clawed at my buckle, trying to free myself, but it held firm, as if welded shut. My seat groaned beneath me, pressing down, holding me captive. The boy, the one who never blinked, appeared in the aisle, standing perfectly still. His eyes locked on mine. Slowly, he raised his hand and pointed forward, toward the cockpit. The cabin lights strobed, blinding flashes of white. And in those brief flickers, the passengers were no longer passengers. Their bodies sagged, skin pale and cracked, jaws slack and open, corpses in uniforms of flesh. The next flash, they were gone. The next, they were closer and closer, closing in around me, whispering my name in voices that weren't their own. The descent grew steeper. The nose of the plane pointed toward the graveyard of steel below. Fire licked the edges of the cracked earth, illuminating what waited for us. A runway of bones, stretching into infinity. The intercom spoke again, louder this time, my own voice commanding. "Landing confirmed." I screamed, but the passengers only smiled. Chapter 15. The Last Passenger. The impact never came. I braced myself for fire, for steel tearing apart, for the graveyard of planes below to swallow us whole. But when the cabin jolted, it wasn't with the violence of a crash. It was the soft, steady thud of wheels meeting ground. We had landed. The seatbelt light blinked off with a gentle chime, and then silence. I lifted my head, trembling. The windows were black. No city lights, no tarmac, just endless dark pressing against the glass. Yet the plane rolled forward, smooth as if guided by invisible tracks. Around me, the passengers stirred. For the first time since we left the ground, they moved naturally, stretching arms, gathering bags, whispering in low tones that weren't quite words. Their eyes never blinked, their smiles never faded, but they rose as one, filing toward the exit like obedient shadows. The intercom hissed, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome home." The word home fractured into echoes, overlapping until it lost all meaning. One by one, the passengers disappeared through the forward door, not stepping onto a jet bridge, not into an airport, but into nothing. The moment they crossed the threshold, their bodies dissolved into ash, swept away by an invisible wind. row by row until this cabin emptied, and then there was only me. I sat frozen, seatbelt still fastened, heart hammering. The seat beside me, 17B, groaned, the buckle unfastening on its own. Slowly, deliberately. The impression of a body lifted, though no one was there. I wasn't alone, I never had been. The boy stood at the end of the aisle, waiting. His eyes reflected the faint glow of the exit sign. "It's your turn," he said, his voice soft, steady. My throat tightened. "Where does it go?" He tilted his head. "Where all passengers go." Into the record. The intercom clicked. A single phrase scrolled across the screen above, bold and final. "Passenger count, 152. Confirmed, 152. I stood on shaking legs, stepping into the aisle. The plane no longer felt like a plane. Its walls breathed, its floor pulsed faintly beneath my feet, as if I were walking inside something alive. The forward door loomed ahead, glowing faintly. The boy stepped aside, smiling for the first time. Not a child's smile, but something older, colder. I reached the threshold. The darkness beyond seemed endless, a mouth waiting to devour me. I hesitated, every nerve in my body screaming to turn back. Then the intercom spoke one final time, my own voice calm and steady. "Flight complete. Passenger 306 confirmed." A hand, unseen but solid, pressed against my back, and I stepped into the dark. The door sealed behind me. The cabin was empty, and Flight 306 was ready for its next passenger.
Epilogue: The Black Box Lives. They found the plane 6 hours later. Flight 306 touched down on schedule. Wheels kissing the runway with perfect precision. No alarms. No distress signals. To the control tower. It looked like any other landing. But when the ground crew boarded, they found the cabin empty. Every seat vacant. Every overhead bin shut. No luggage. No passengers. Not even the crew. Just silence thick enough to suffocate. And one thing. A small black box. Resting neatly on seat 17A. The investigators retrieved it. Confused but careful. No sign of tampering. No damage. It should have been locked deep in the cockpit. Yet here it was. Waiting. They played it in a sealed room. Static roared. Then settled. A voice emerged. My voice. Passenger count, 152. Confirmed, 152. The investigators exchanged glances. Unsettled. The voice continued. Broken by screams. Prayers. Whispers in dozens of languages. A chorus of lost flights. And then came the message that froze them all. Boarding for Flight 307, now commencing. The audio cut. Silence. But when they rewound, when they listened again, something new had appeared, a faint knock echoing from inside the recorder, as if someone were trapped within. The lead investigator leaned close to the device, pressing his ear against the metal, and the voice whispered, so soft it might have come from inside his own head. "Welcome aboard." Outside the hangar, on the tarmac, another plane waited. Painted numbers glowed faintly in the moonlight. Flight 307. Its boarding door stood open, and in the gate lounge, a woman flipped through her boarding pass. Frowning. Her ticket said seat 17A. She almost didn't notice the gate agent's hesitation when she scanned it, or the way the woman's hands trembled. Almost. But the flight was on time, and the plane was waiting.